Good morning, everyone. Very warm welcome to the House of Switzerland at the Paralympic Games. My name is Phillip Ittig, and I'm the director of the House of Switzerland. It is a pleasure and a great honor to host today's panel at the House of Switzerland during the Paralympic Games. A panel which is organized by the US Center for Safe Sports. The House of Switzerland is a place of encounters. It is a place with the aim of bringing together athletes, officials, sport fans, and friends of sports. It is a platform to exchange ideas, and it is a platform to engage in meaningful conversations that go beyond the competition itself. The Paralympic Games provide an especially powerful setting for this. On the one hand, the Paralympic Games showcase extraordinary athletic performance, determination, and resilience. But they also remind us of the deeper values that sport represents: respect, inclusion, fairness, and integrity. Ensuring sport is safe for everyone is fundamental to protect these values. Safeguarding athletes, creating environments built on trust and respect, and promoting accountability across sport organizations, other organizations, and institutions are responsibilities that we all share. I'm particularly pleased that the House of Switzerland can serve as a platform for today's discussion on safeguarding in sports. It is an issue that concerns all of us across countries, organizations, and disciplines. It is also an issue that requires continuous dialogue, commitment, and collaboration. I'm grateful to the US Center for Safe Sports for bringing this important conversation to Cortina and to the House of Switzerland. And thank all of you for joining this panel. The US Center for Safe Sports appointed last month its new executive officer, Benita Fitzgerald Mosley. Benita is not only an international executive leader in non-profit sport and business, but she's also an Olympic gold medalist who won 100-meter hurdles at the LA 1984 Olympic Games, and she's the first American woman to win this event. She's also the former chief operating officer of the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and she held several other senior leadership roles in sport. With her unique experience as both an Olympic champion and a senior leader in international sports, she brings an important perspective to the topic of safeguarding and athlete well-being. It is therefore a great pleasure to welcome her here today at the House of Switzerland and to this panel. Please join me in welcoming Benita Fitzgerald Mosley. Dear Benita, the stage is yours.
Buongiorno e benvenuto. United globally for athlete safety. Grazie mille, and thank you, Philip, for that wonderful, warm introduction, and also to Caroline and Martina and the entire Swiss House team, for opening your doors and donating the use of this beautiful space for this important conversation. I want to thank our panel of elite athletes, which I'm really excited to moderate a little bit later, because you've given of your valuable time to join us today, and I really look forward to the discussion. Most importantly, I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your very busy game schedules to join us today and to prioritize athlete safety in the Paralympic ecosystem. I'm humbled to be in front of an audience of this importance and caliber, and I've been affiliated with about 9 Olympic Games, either as an athlete or an administrator. But guess what? My first Paralympic Games here in Cortina. And it's, yes. And it's particularly, wonderful that it's the 50th anniversary of the Paralympic Winter Games. It's been an honor to serve as the CEO, and it's a privilege to witness the athletic prowess and also the defy the odds mindset of our Paralympic athletes, and that permeates, I believe, throughout the Paralympic community. The energy that comes from being surrounded by athletes and their families from all over the world always inspires me and motivates me. And here today, we have individuals from over 20 countries and 5 continents here for this conversation. We have representatives from national and international federations. We have folks from the National Paralympic Committee. Raise your hand. There we go. Got several. International Olympic Committee, U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. Raise your hands. There we go. Yes. So thank you, all of you, for being here today. Well, we all share a common belief that we're better together. We're all here today because we recognize that sports unite people from all walks of life, and that there's a sense of camaraderie that binds us in a very fundamental and human way. We also agree that the well-being of athletes is important. If you didn't agree, we wouldn't be here in Cortina to celebrate their athletic prowess. By ensuring that every athlete from every country has their very basic needs met for athlete safety, sports can truly transform individuals and teams and organizations and nations and regions and even the entire world. I began as CEO of the U.S. Center for SafeSport just about 6 weeks ago. And I accepted this role because for me it's more than a job, it's a calling. It's a calling for me to bring together my experience as an Olympian and as a business leader and the skills that I've accumulated throughout my career to lead a pioneering organization that really has moved the needle for athlete safety in the United States. We currently have more than 2,500 individuals listed on our centralized disciplinary database. And these are people who've had their access restricted to protect the participants in the Olympic movement in the United States. And we want to share what we've learned through these first 9 tumultuous years in existence, including some of the challenges that we've met. We also want to learn from you. We want to learn best practices and strategies that you're doing to protect your athletes. And I'm really eager, like I said, to moderate this panel of not only athletes, but experts as well. But most importantly, we really want to talk about how we can collaborate between and among our countries to ensure that athletes at every level, from the practice field to the Olympic podium, feel safe and supported and strengthened through the power of sport. This collaboration is especially critical for the U.S. Center for SafeSport as we gear up for the LA 28 Games. As a gold medalist in '84, I'm especially excited to go back to that town, but also to have a gold medal plan for athlete safety. So thank you all for your participation today. I look forward to interacting with you either during the break or after time it's over. But before we're going to now bring up our executive leadership team so you guys can start walking up if you want. But before we introduce the first panel, I wanted to recognize someone very special. Where's April? Right here, stand up. Not only is she the chair emeritus of the U.S. Center for SafeSport, she's also a Paralympic gold medalist, but it's also her birthday. So I think it's really fortuitous that this event fell on your birthday. It's very fitting. She served as interim CEO for 9 months or so while they were doing the search for me, ultimately. And so she's, going well above and beyond to serve athletes in that capacity. So I'm going to turn it over to the panel for our executive leadership team.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're here, the executive leadership team of the U.S. Center for SafeSport, to give just a very brief overview of our process. And we have each of our department heads here to give you that overview. We are very eager and excited to move on after this to our international panel, and you'll see our panelists up there. So you have with you on your chair handout, which is really helpful, I think, for this presentation. It walks through each of our 3 core pillars. So the U.S. Center for SafeSport came about as a response to a need. It came about in the wake of instances of high-profile cases of abuse and misconduct in USA Gymnastics and other sports. The public demanded action, athletes demanded action, and Congress took action. They authorized legislation to give SafeSport, the U.S. Center for SafeSport, an independent entity, the authority to investigate and adjudicate allegations of abuse and misconduct throughout Olympic and Paralympic sport. Additionally, we have the mandate to educate and ensure that participants in the movement understand how to recognize, prevent, and respond to abuse and misconduct. We're approaching our 9th year, as our new CEO mentioned, of operation. We've learned many lessons along the way, and we hope to share some of those with you today. This panel is really meant to showcase our core pillars and how they work to advance athlete safety within the Olympic movement. We'll have a brief opportunity for questions at the very end after our international panel, and we ask that those questions stay focused on the content of safeguarding. So without further ado, I have the privilege of introducing my esteemed colleagues, and they will give an overview of the work they do. And I have next to me here Monica Rivera. She's our Vice President of Research and Education. She has 20-plus years experience of abuse prevention, including in the U.S. and international organizations where she spent much of that time working directly with survivors. She's a TEDx speaker, a chapter co-author, a faculty member, and a featured content contributor. She's also a survivor and brings that lived experience to every aspect of her work. Growing up, she was a competitive cheerleader and a gymnast and a swimmer. Next to Monica, we have Jessica Perril. She's our General Counsel and our Vice President of Response and Resolution. She's got 19 plus years of legal experience, including 14 as a lawyer with the State Colorado Attorney General's Office. She began her career litigating cases involving child abuse, neglect, and the mistreatment of at-risk adults. Since joining the center, she's led a series of process changes in our response and resolution team to improve consistency, increase trauma-informed care, and streamline ways of working. She grew up playing competitive soccer and now enjoys watching her own children play competitive sport. And finally, we have Hannah Hinton. She's our Vice President of Organizational Development and Compliance. She's legally trained compliance professional and an attorney with 15 years of experience building audit and compliance frameworks across collegiate and Olympic sport. She's been with the center for 7 years, almost the lifetime of our organization, and she oversees both audit and compliance functions for 52 national governing bodies. She believes that the goal isn't just passing an audit, it's creating safe environments where athletes can thrive. She's a former D1 collegiate tennis player who now channels that competitive energy into solo international travel and spoiling her rescue dog, Ruby. And I'll be moderating this conversation. I'm Hilary Nemchik. I'm Vice President of External Affairs, overseeing government relations, communications, and stakeholder engagement for the organization. And it's my pleasure to work with these incredible women. So I'll hand it off to you, Monica.
Good morning. I'm honored to be with you here today. I wish that we had 3 hours just to talk about education, but Hilary runs a tight ship, so I'm going to keep my notes close to make sure we stay within the time. As Hilary mentioned, the U.S. Center for SafeSport focuses on 3 primary pillars: individual accountability, organizational accountability, and then education is the through line through each of those areas. My team focuses on research and education. Our research team produces original research, mostly on the climate of safeguarding within sport. If you go to our website, you can find we have several athlete climate surveys which speak to the experiences of all athletes, including athletes with disabilities. And then in your packet of information, we have a little postcard. We just released a brand new survey of almost 4,000 coaches that speaks to the experiences of coaches within the sport ecosystem. So we welcome your feedback and involvement in our research. On the education side, my team spends a tremendous amount of time trying to figure out how do we get people to actually learn this stuff. Because education sounds, really easy. And oftentimes whenever organizations have a safeguarding concern, they often want to turn to more training. But there really is a difference between just providing information to people and actually creating education that inspires behavior change. And for me, this work is both personal and professional. So I know that as a survivor, abuse impacts people. It has material impact for a lifetime. And so education helps us know what we're fighting against. But as an educator and as a mom, it's really important that we know what we're fighting for. And so at SafeSport, we are fighting for sport cultures where all athletes feel safe and where abuse has nowhere to thrive. Real prevention for us really is not just about, raising awareness about abuse. I do think that we have come to a place, thankfully, in safeguarding that most people know that abuse is an issue. What we're really trying to do is to take that awareness and to bring it into the homes, all throughout throughout our sport ecosystems. One of the things that we've done recently for the Olympic and Paralympic Games is to create a guide for parents who are watching the Olympic Games at home with their kids. And that's a discussion guide so that they can start to identify sport dynamics on the screen, things like teamwork and coaching dynamics, and then engage in really low pressure conversations with their kids to ask questions about how does what you're seeing on the screen mirror what happens in your own sport environment. Because for a long time, safeguarding education primarily focused on trying to spot the bad guys, if you will, trying to find the people who are causing harm. And don't get me wrong, that work really matters. It's still very important. But if someone knows that they would never harm a child, and they trust the coaches around them, they might not necessarily feel responsible for safeguarding. They might not find a role for themselves in getting involved in safeguarding. And so what's really important to us is that we're trying to find ways that everyone, regardless of whether they are an athlete, a coach, an administrator, can see themselves as invested in safeguarding. We're trying to also shift the narrative around abuse to try to expand and understand more broadly, what do we mean when we're talking about abuse? So also in your handouts, you'll see at the bottom portion, there's something that looks like a series of pebbles. So many people imagine that abuse is just a single dramatic act of violence, very obvious, everyone would spot it. But in reality, that's not always what abuse looks like. The larger blue pebbles represent those acts of violence, but the smaller pebbles that lead up to it, and then the pebbles that follow, are the seemingly smaller patterns of behavior that actually might not even violate a safeguarding policy, but that create an environment where abuse can thrive. One example, sometimes we'll hear administrators who feel frustrated because parents will call and complain about playing time and how frustrating that is. But we know that in the post-abuse maintenance phase, sometimes abusers will manipulate playing time as a way to keep survivors silent. So if we just dismiss playing time complaints as not having anything to do with safeguarding, we miss the opportunity to intervene early. Because abuse develops through patterns of behaviors in environments that allow harm to take root. Research also shows that athletes with disabilities face much higher risks of abuse, and that has nothing to do with the disability itself, right? It has to do with the structural barriers, such as fewer programs for athletes to be enrolled in, a greater reliance on adults for access and support. I'm the parent of a disabled child, and I know that it's not simple if you have a program that you don't feel comfortable in to just find another one up the street. So sometimes that pressure can make it difficult to speak up early. That's why my team is also expanding our expertise in this area. We're currently in the hiring process for an accessibility specialist. We should have that person on board in the next couple weeks. And that person's gonna really help act as a subject matter expert to help us understand those pebbles, if you will. What are some of the seemingly small things that can lead up to acts of violence and then also lead to silence within communities? When we focus on environmental protection, so making sure that the environment around our athletes is safe, it not only empowers us all and helps give us a sense of responsibility, but it can also make safeguarding move just beyond a policy and into our daily lived experience. I'll sometimes hear from coaches, you know, Monica, I don't understand. I would never hurt a kid. So isn't the safest thing for me to drive them home? Doesn't that make sense for me to drive them home after practice? But what folks are sometimes missing then is that you're unintentionally creating an environment where one-to-one contact between an adult and a minor is normalized. And then that puts the responsibility on children who are not developmentally able to discern what's a safe ride home and what's not. So it's a subtle shift. We still want to be able to pay attention to folks who are causing harm, and Jessica's going to talk about that really important individual accountability level. But what we're hoping to do, and would love to be able to hear from some of you internationally, is how are we taking this work into the lower levels, the daily behaviors, so that safeguarding is not a once-a-year training, but it actually becomes about creating an environment where we all feel responsible. And through that, we're hoping that coaches, athletes, administrators, parents will feel empowered to intervene earlier, will feel empowered to take responsibility and speak up early, and will help build sport cultures where abuse has nowhere to hide. And with that, I'm excited to pass things over to my colleague, Jessica.
Thanks, Monica. Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here. As Hilary mentioned, I'm Jessica Perrili. I'm General Counsel at the U.S. Center for SafeSport, as well as Vice President of Response and Resolution. And I oversee Response and Resolution, which is the individual accountability sort of prong at the U.S. Center for SafeSport. And, you know, one of the things, I think that Benita mentioned this, that we have in the United States that's really helpful is a statute that Congress passed, giving us the authority to do everything that we do, but more specifically to do what we do within the response and resolution team. And that authority allows us to take in reports of abuse within the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic movement, to investigate them, and then we have a process at the end that I'll go through here in a minute to adjudicate them ultimately. When we were started in 2017 and given this authority, there really wasn't a playbook for this work. There was, you know, certainly we could look to the U.S. Criminal justice system as sort of a process to maybe mirror. We could look at the Title IX space within the United States, which is our college, university, NCAA process for guidance as well, but there really wasn't anything exactly on point. So at the time, the U.S. Center for SafeSport had to just figure it out. And candidly, that did not come without its stumbling blocks. There have been missteps along the way, a lot of lessons learned. But I do know one thing that has been true all along since the very beginning is the center's commitment to athlete safety, and that very much continues today. So if you, in the same handout that Monica was referencing, there's a series of 5 kind of blocks that talk about the response and resolution process, and I'm just going to briefly go through those. So we, like I said, have a statute that allows us to take reports, and we take reports over the phone, we take reports over a web portal. We are allowed to take anonymous reports, or people are able to self-identify within the reporting process. Either of those are acceptable. When we take reports that are anonymous, it does at times impact our ability to move forward with a case depending on the level of information that we receive during that reporting process. We then have to determine whether or not we have jurisdiction over a case. As I mentioned, we only have jurisdiction over the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic movement. And an athlete, a coach, a trainer, whoever the person that is being accused of misconduct, that individual has to be within that space. If they aren't, then we don't have jurisdiction. So we sift through our reports in order to make that determination pretty early on. And one thing that I should have mentioned too a minute ago, just for some context, is that in our first year of the center, we received somewhere in the realm of a couple of hundred reports. Last year in 2025, we received just over 9,000 reports. And additionally, last month, we received just over 1,100 reports, which was in 1 month, which was the most reports we've ever received in a month. So as you can imagine, that drastic increase in reporting has put a strain on our resources, and we're constantly trying to figure out how to manage that. I think ultimately it's a good thing, right? Because people are comfortable coming forward and coming to the center with reports of misconduct. But it has been a challenge for sure. So those jurisdictional determinations are made from a personal jurisdiction standpoint. Subject matter jurisdiction is the next assessment. That basically means whether or not the misconduct includes allegations of sexual misconduct. We will always take those cases. If it involves allegations of emotional or physical abuse, more often than not, we are not going to take those, and we're going to send those back to the national governing body to resolve. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Primarily that our initial mandate was really around sexual misconduct. After that, we're conducting some preliminary assessments, and we're moving on to our investigation phase. An investigation in our process looks, very similar to what you would imagine it would look like. We're taking in evidence, documentary evidence, interviews, really whatever we can get our hands on. I will say the one limitation, or one of the limitations that we have, is we do not have subpoena power within our process, so we really do have to rely on folks to participate within our process, which can at times be challenging. Sort of the final stage of our process is our legal process, and we have what is now a fairly robust legal team led by Kyle McTaggart, who's sitting in the back of the room over there. Raise your hand, Kyle. And that team handles all of our entire legal process. So that can include our merits arbitrations, which are sort of the end. Once we get to the end of our cases, a respondent in our process, who is the accused, has the ability to request an arbitration. And that goes before an independent arbitrator. It looks very much like a mini trial. Both sides present evidence. The arbitrator ultimately makes a decision as to whether or not they agree with our assessment of the case, whether they agree with our sanctions. They have the ability to either completely accept our decision, they can modify our decision in some way, or they can completely overturn our decision. So that's sort of the end of our process. I would be remiss too if I didn't mention that we also have what are called process navigators within response and resolution. And this is a team of individuals who are trained in trauma-informed care, and they really are meant to help guide participants in our process through our process. It can be very daunting at times, I'm sure, as athletes in the room, potential survivors in the room could imagine. It's not an easy thing to go through, to have to rehash the misconduct that you may have experienced. And so while our process navigators are not victim advocates, they are not psychologists, they are available and ready to help guide folks through our process, and can also help refer them to resources outside of the center when appropriate. So that is another great thing that we have within response and resolution. Lastly, I think I'll mention, I think Benita touched on this, but one of the most amazing things we have at the center, I think, and coming out of response and resolution is our centralized disciplinary database. And that is a database publicly available to anyone in the world, anyone in this room, that houses a list of everybody that we have found, basically anybody that we have suspended in some capacity, whether we're suspending them for a month or whether we're making them permanently ineligible to participate in sport. And we really do try and get the word out about that. You don't have to be within the Olympic or Paralympic movement to look at the database. It's available to anyone if you just want to go on it and see, is this coach that I'm hiring for something, or this trainer that I'm hiring for something currently on the U.S. Center for Safe Sports database. You can go look it up. One of the limitations I should add, though, to our database is that it includes individuals who are currently barred from sport. So as an example, if we suspend a coach for 2 years and that person's suspension ended yesterday, today you're not going to find them on the list. So that is one limitation to the list. But nevertheless, it is an incredibly useful resource that we really encourage all of you to use and hope that you will pass on the word. One of the reasons why I think that's really useful in this space is that I'm sure as you can all imagine, we have cases that move across country lines all the time. We've had cases with some of the countries that are sitting in this room today where a coach maybe coached for a while in the United States, goes and coaches in another country, And we've had collaborative conversations, again, with some of the countries in this room, and those have proved to be invaluable for us, and I hope the same is true for your countries. And we'd like to continue those conversations. So I hope to connect with some of you over the various breaks, and like I said, I'm really grateful to be here with you all today. I'm going to pass it off to Hannah Hinton, who's going to talk about our organizational accountability.
Thank you, Jessica. So, organizational development and compliance. What is that? What does that mean? So the third pillar, what we really do is take a lot of the work that you heard from Monica and Jessica, and we really operationalize that for the national governing bodies in the US, so that safeguarding isn't something that just exists on paper, but it's something that's actually being implemented in the day-to-day, real life, and sport environments. So the primary way that we do that is through what we call preventative compliance audits. There are 52 national governing bodies in the US Olympic and Paralympic movement. We audit them annually. And these really move beyond compliance tick boxes to actually making sure that the policies are being implemented on the ground. Okay? So that handout, again, reference that again, this is the last bucket on the back side of it. I'm gonna kind of walk through high level, sort of what those preventative audits look like, and when we're out in the field, what we're really striving for. So first, our minor athlete abuse prevention policies, we call the MAP. These policies really govern, Monica referenced it, the interactions between adults and minors in various spaces. So we look at fields, pools, locker rooms, sanctioned events, training camps. We're not having these audits in boardrooms or compliance rooms. They're happening out in the field. And what we do is really make sure that the policies are being understood and implemented in the unique ways that every sport is very different, particularly from elite to grassroots. Now, of important note, on the Paralympic side, in 2022, our policies had an overhaul. So we brought in key stakeholders, Paralympic athletes as well as leaders, to really come in and revise and make sure the policy spoke to the unique circumstances, particularly around personal care assistance, to make sure that there weren't inadvertent gaps because of the needs there. So those have been in place now for 4 years. So this is the first thing that we look at when we're out in the field. The second thing that we look at is reporting mechanisms and protocols to make sure that they're accessible, that people understand where to report, unfortunately it's gonna happen, and that they feel empowered to do so. The next prong that we look at is, on Monica's side, is the education and training. So it's important that leaders have taken this training. It's important that individuals who are having any authority or regular contact with minors have also taken this training. It's a 90-minute course. And then finally, taking Jessica's work, she mentioned the centralized disciplinary database. Our team makes sure that those national governing bodies actually have mechanisms in place to ensure that those individuals who we've banned or suspended aren't competing. What good is it to have the list if they're just, continuing to show up and have that exposure? So those are the prongs we look at, but compliance doesn't just stop there. And to have true culture change, you have to move beyond sort of the tick boxes. And so what we're really trying to build in the US is preventative focused systems that become ingrained in the organizational DNA of the 52 national governing bodies. What does that mean? That looks like continuous monitoring, ongoing support, and real accountability to build infrastructures that are sustainable over time and also adaptable. Right? Sport changes, we have to move with that to ensure that safeguarding is kept at the forefront. So I hope what you've heard today is that these three pillars, none of them can work in a silo. And to have the deep, lasting culture change, all three of these pillars must work together to reinforce each other and to close the gaps. And hopefully sending an unmistakable message that when it comes to athlete well-being and safety, it's non-negotiable, and then it's everyone's responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. So in the interest of time, we're going to hold the Q&A, if there's any related to our presentation here, till the very end of the program. Right now, we're going to have a very brief break, and then we're going to bring our next panel up to the front. Thank you so much.